liking this presentation so much, he joined twice.
That makes sense. That would give the rebound. Hey, I'm calling it 35. I think we already have 36 people in a session. Who knows, maybe more will join later on, but we're going to start this now. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this event. Some of you know, basically this is a Capgemini event. We have an enthusiastic front-end team at Capgemini who organize these kind of events every 2 months on a different subject. And this is our way of sharing knowledge within our company and with our colleagues. And it's also kind of a fun way to have a nice evening coding. This is the first time we're doing this event online. We're making it into a meetup, and we're going to try to do that every 2 months. So the next session will be about Storybook, and I will be presenting that myself. And that will be somewhere in September, most probably, because we're going to take it over the holidays. This is going to be an informal session. Like you can already see, we were joking around, making stupid remarks. That's pretty much how these sessions go. It's also how we would like to see them go. And at the end of it, there's always a little bit of coding, hands-on coding, so that at the end you can create something yourself and you can actually get a feeling of how it is to work with the subject we were talking about. I'm going to give the word to Florian, and Florian will take us into the world of end-to-end testing with Cucumber.
Yes, thank you, Ryan. End-to-end testing with JavaScript. Also, a quick note here. Every 2 months, we organize something for front-enders, but also every Wednesday evening, so that's on a weekly basis even. Our colleague Hans van Rijs, who is also in here, who helped us organize, also organizes something for all kinds of different subjects. So that's how we do all kinds of knowledge sharing on any and all kinds of subjects. Like today, it's about end-to-end testing with JavaScript. Next week, it could be about automating your home with Arduinos, or I don't know, programming something using WebGL, or he has, the subject list is nearly endless with, I think, already 10 years of this kinds of really cool talks. But the topic of today is end-to-end testing with JavaScript, or I would like to call it BDD testing, which stands for behavior-driven development. So first I'll tell you a little bit about me, so you know who is actually talking here, to get to know each other a bit better. Then I'll actually talk about what is behavior-driven development. And as I'm a web developer, I'm going to focus on that testing subject on what I build most, which is websites. So we'll look how to apply behavior-driven development for testing websites. And then, of course, it only gets real when we will do a small demo of it first, and then let you guys build it yourself. Have some time for that, and after that, small wrap-up of this evening, maybe some lingering questions or anything, and some takeaways. Questions not only at the end, also just via the chat or hand raising in Teams. Like there's this functionality here. When I hover over the Teams interface, I see this hand thing. I can click on it. I get a notification of that. So I can give you some space for answering those. Continuing on for that. Who am I? Florian van der Wielen. On Twitter, also known as @FlorianVWielen. Apparently, you need to show your Twitter handles on these kinds of things. I'm working at Capgemini for 8+ years, actually 8.5 already. Worked for 5.5 years at ABN AMRO, a bigger Dutch bank, making internet banking. The interface, trying to build a front-end framework, actually when they did not exist yet. No React, no Vue, Angular in alpha phase. For 5.5 years, that was a lot of fun. But after that, I was interested in something new. So within Capgemini, they came for me for an interesting project at Dutch Police, politie.nl, their main website, Kom bij de politie, their HR and vacancy website. where I've been now for the last 3 years. And next to that, I'm also the team lead of the DCX front-end team, of which you see a picture over here. This is not everybody, but most of them. And I'm really happy to be part of that team and helping them towards achieving greatness. Yeah. So, to the topic of this evening, what is end-to-end testing? When people talk about that kind of subject, they typically think of end users using end products, software products that we build in those kinds of situations. But actually a different approach and a different name, as I said, is calling it behavior-driven development, which is an explanatory name, which is development driven by behavior. But yeah, behavior is kind of vague, woolly subject. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, there doesn't show a proper definition. But if you follow the link then to Wiktionary, their dictionary version of Wikipedia, it says actions and mannerisms made by agents or persons or humans. And in our case, we're actually talking about our product because we're developing products. So we're interested in the behavior of our product. And actually the picture that you see next to it of a blue screen of death is actually also some kind of behavior. Because you're in the 90s working on your Windows 95 machine and you're giving the computer some input and all of a sudden the screen turns blue. So you see some action that the computer gives to you as a result of your input. And where does this actually come from? A bit of context. It comes from the Agile software development movement. Which is a recent innovation in software development, where before us software development experts, the developers that write the code, testers, project managers, everybody, was really focusing in building the thing right. How in our craftsmanship should this piece of software consist? Like, how can we make this piece of code performant, and how can we make this piece of code I don't know, maintainable, those kinds of subjects. But we saw that we were not making the right products in that kind of way, not the right kind of software. We should focus in being more agile towards building the right thing. What is meant with that? When we start a software project, it's actually really important to keep in mind what is the thing that we're trying to solve here with our piece of software. What use should it be to your user, to the other stakeholders? What is it actually they want that your software does? And that's actually something that we can solve with behavior-driven development. It comes from as a part of agile software development, and as most agile software development practices, they work with user stories. Think of Scrum with your product backlog, where you have just a list of user stories, mini projects that you want implemented because that makes your users and your other stakeholders happy. And you should really invest in writing proper user stories. And what do I mean with that? It's a nice mnemonic that wraps these terms that a good user story adheres to. Like a good user story should be independent. If I have two user stories, I can choose to implement either one or the other. So I can just start with that and focus on that and just deliver value immediately. It should also be negotiable. Instead of being just a completely filled in contract, completely drilled down in the details where everything should be, how it should look like, and so on and so forth. That should be relatively open because that's easier to build them. Most importantly, of course, it should be valuable. Sadly, the mnemonic doesn't start with a V because then it gets all messy. Finesse is nothing. And also my invest in good user stories joke wouldn't really work. But of course, if your new feature does not add value to your user, why you're building it in the first place, right? A good user story is also estimable. It's also small, and it's also finally testable. If I have my product, I want to be able to test if that feature is implemented in it. And it's actually that testable and valuable where behavior-driven development with SBEs come together. What are SBEs? They're specifications by example, and they're actually these short statements. So which consists of these three parts. The first, given a user and a product in a certain situation, when the user does something with your product, then the product responds in a certain kind of way. So, and as we recall from earlier, that's something that we call behavior. Our product does something according to certain input. As an example, given a user, for example, on our login page, and he has already an account, this is in the database of our current website. When this user attempts to log in, then he successfully logs in and sees his user page, as of course he has an account, it's matched, and the login lets him pass through. And apparently in our situation here, it seems most useful if he gets redirected to his user page, which is fine. So these SBEs, these given, when, then statements, that's really the core of behavior-driven development, and they work both as specifications for the business to describe real end-user scenarios. Right, it's really a user that wants to log in that already has a user, and as such, it's really easy for the stakeholder to validate that that's the valuable behavior of your website. But again, they also quite work as tests, because these are something that you can do. You can get your website, make a user account, try to log in with that user account, and see if you successfully do so and get redirected to your personal page. So that's something you can do and can test for. So that's how they actually work as a link between testing and business value. On a side note, though, when we have these tests, we can let them be executed by humans. But yeah, humans, they're slow. They make mistakes. They're also not cheap. They ask for salary and stuff like that. They're finicky. They're unavailable. If I want to run nightly tests, like these humans, these developers, they don't stay like awake at night at the office. They want to go home, or they want to turn off their laptop in these times. So what if we get computers to do them, which are cheaper? They don't ask for salary. You can run them all night with less issues. And they always do the same thing the same way. So they don't make mistakes. And actually, that's something that you can do with Cucumber. Cucumber is a tool that can run test code against your SBE feature files. So if you write these files, which are just plain text files, with these given, when, then statements, and I'll show them in the demo, then Cucumber can read those files and try to run some code against it. And how that will actually work out, I will show you that in the demo later on. And also as a side note and a small tip, those specification by examples, those given, when, then statements, Cucumber calls them gherkins. That's why the wallpaper of Ryan has all these gherkins on the background. They also work really well to structure your unit tests and to improve them, therefore. Because if you use this structure, your given statement really helps you to make your code isolated, because you're just the test that you're trying to run clearly states what situation you're testing for and nothing else. It's also really small statements that don't rely on each other. So that also makes them small and atomic. And while you're annotating what you're doing in your actual unit test, it also makes your unit test quite readable. So that's a hearty recommendation already right there. Time for a small quiz. Because fill in after me. Websites are visited by users using
dogs.
No dogs. Not cheese.
No dogs. Not cheese.
Browsers. Yes, browsers. Exactly. Point for Jaap. So actually our tests need to do that as well, right? Because we're given a user and it's using the product. So we're actually talking about building and testing websites here. So our tests will also, like the users, get a browser in the given stage, then use that browser to visit the website as a person would, according to our scenario, in the when stage. And afterwards, check the results of how that user input was reacted upon by our website. And as those results are on a web page, that's also done in the browser. Looking at tools that can do this for us, there's two tools that can do this. The first one is Selenium WebDriver, which is fairly old, at least a lot older, a lot more mature. And because of that, it's also feature complete. It has all kinds of tools and plugins. I see a question. I'll first finish this little bit. So you have all these kinds of plugins for Selenium available, but also language support is great. Today's demo is about using WebDriver, also Cucumber, but also WebDriver in a JavaScript setting, but it also works for Java, Python, and many other languages. A thing that Selenium WebDriver does run into is that it's not always that performant. Which is sometimes held against it, but that's also sometimes how the test code is written. But it's something that you need to keep a check on. But since recently, there's a different tool, Puppeteer. Some people might know that one already, which is built in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, which is a team at Google. So it really works well against Chrome mostly. And that team has been hired by Microsoft in the last few years. So they started to build that again, but then a bit better, a bit more browser independent, so more cross-browser compatible, which is called Playwright. You see the link there. But it's only from 2019. It's way less complete. For example, to test for mobile browsers, it can only do this via emulation. It cannot actually connect yet to a mobile browser on your mobile phone, which is on a different device. It claims to have much better performance, and thinking about the developer experience, so writing Playwright code should be better. And for now, it's only node-based because it really comes from this front-end community. I also see Fred asking, what about curl commands to post a form? Well, there are things you can test by doing that, but most users don't browse the internet using curl. So if you really want to check whether your website works for your user, you should use the website according to how that user is probably using it. If there's a big user base, of course, using curl to do that, then by all means, yes. But most websites are usually visited by using browsers. So that's why I'm focusing this talk on using that. But if there is a valid use case for that, then you could do those end user tests by running curl commands if that fits your use case. I hope that answers your question. So let's go through these steps again and see how these tools perform on that. Firstly, getting the browser. And actually, both tools need to download a connector. And what is a connector? A connector is an application that actually allows your test code to connect to that browser. And in the case of WebDriver, this is an executable called Chrome driver or Gecko driver. And you need to download the appropriate one to the browser that you want to test for. You can already hear that from the name Chrome browser for Chrome, a Chrome driver for Chrome. Gecko driver is for Firefox, as Gecko is the a name highly associated to Firefox, and the appropriate OS. So you can have a gecko driver.exe for if you're running your code on Windows, but Gecko driver without anything extra if you want to run it on the Unix system. And actually Playwright also does that, although when you try to use it, you don't see it. But Playwright just tries to smooth out that developer experience, so you don't, as a developer, need to download this executable. And it downloads this connector. Well, actually it downloads a complete browser, which it has modified so it can call that browser to do this testing for you, which is a smooth experience, but it also has a downside because this modified browser is modified by the Playwright team. So the Playwright team constantly needs to play catch up with the actual browser developers, because if they the team from Mozilla would publish a new version of Firefox today, then only today the Playwright team can modify that browser to also have the Playwright connector built into it. So it's in that sense a bit more tricky to constantly stay up to date. Okay, so now we can get our browser to mimic our user. So let's use this browser. For the most basic things that you need to do in a normal desktop setup, both can actually do most what you need. But what is important to realize, your browser and your test code, there are different applications. So as this is called in computer terms, they run the different applications. There are different processes, there are different threads. So people that know a bit about multi-threading, they know that they communicate asynchronously. And JavaScript developers might know asynchronous code and know that then they need to apply promises. And that's actually this top code fragment there. And yes, that works, but as you can also see, that's also a little bit confusing. Luckily, within Node, you can use async await, which is just a way to write your code. And that also allows for this asynchronous behavior. So every single time in your JavaScript test code that you would need to call this browser, and we will see that in the code example, we will need to write this in an async function that can then await for WebDriver for its results, or for Playwright if we would be talking about Playwright code. Then in our final step, we've talked about our given, our when, so this is our then step. We're checking the browser, whether it's responded to our input in the previous step in the right way. So actually, is the page that we get returned from the browser as we expect it to be? Which means that we check certain bits of content on that page, whether they're present and or visible. And I don't know if some people have ever used the internet with a poor internet connection. A website can also become like quite unusable when we just see an infinite loader spinner, or it just responds after like 30 seconds. So that's also something that we will see pop up in our test code, because we will also have some timeouts there waiting for a certain period of time. And if that doesn't occur, then the test code just says that it failed, and the test will report accordingly. So like this, we can build actual code for a given step, for a when step, and our then step. Comparing Selenium WebDriver versus Playwright, a typical thing that people then want to ask, or the clients then ask, which tool should we use? Because of course we should use the best tool, because the world is always that simple. Well, the typical developer response is then, of course, it depends. And also, in this case, it depends. And I would say it depends most importantly on what people can work with, because the actual developers, of course, need to write this test code that needs to work well. So what languages does your team know? If they know JavaScript, then Playwright is a nice choice. But if there's maybe a lot of backend developers, or there's maybe testers that, by my experience, firstly learn Java, then Playwright is a bit of a difficult choice. Also, what features are important in your test plan? Is it important to have performance test? Maybe then Playwright is a good choice. Or is it actually important to check for mobile browsers, because you're using advanced browser features that are a bit more shaky on mobile browsers? Also, an important question is what can be implemented in your current workflow, or your development test acceptance production code flow. For example, if you're building a backend project that is Spring Java based, then yes, you could write Playwright, but that's really JavaScript front end focused, which means Node, which means NPM. But your Java Spring application is probably built around a build tool like Maven or Gradle. So then you need something that connects your Maven or Gradle setup again with your NPM Node setup. So you need to fix that. So then it could be a good choice to go for Selenium WebDriver, which is more readily available in the Maven world. You can just import it as a Maven package. However, concretely, which would I choose? Well, within the projects that I work with, it's usually also with test experts, and they learn firstly, as I said, they learn firstly Java, which is a language that's learned easily, that there's exists for quite a while. Especially the type of code that you need to write for these kinds of projects is quite hashed out. It's quite known, so that makes it quite teachable, and that's important because testers are nowadays also often called quality assurance experts, and that's a much more holistic approach than just the tech heads that the developers are. So they just don't have time to always learn all of the tools towards perfection, let's say. And Java really lends itself for that. That fits best with Cucumber and Selenium. It's time for a demo. And in my demo project, I will show it to you in just a few seconds. I've built 3 tests. One is the most basic test. I call it a hello world. And it will check a certain web page, werken bij capgemini.nl, by a request of Lotte. And just check whether there is some content on that page. A second test will check for some form input. So it will go to a certain page, fill in a tiny form, a search box to be exact, and then it will check whether the backend, the web page, the website, has actually legit searched for that kind of thing. And as a small bonus, I've also made a small accessibility test because actually this WebDriver code is all just code and allows you to integrate all kinds of tools with it. There are actually plugins for WebDriver that integrate X. You type it AXE. I will just type that into the chat. As an accessibility tool. And you can run it with it while it does its accessibility audit while you are running your normal tests. So that shows a little bit of integration to also pick along and improve other aspects of quality of your product. Let's go to the project itself. I still have it open here. So I've checked it out. It's a Git project. It's an npm project. It's a Node project, and as such, we see here a .git folder. As it's a Git project, it also has a git ignore because it's of course easy. It's an npm project, and therefore it has a Node modules folder with the dependencies. It has package.json and a package block.json as it's a npm project. It has a README, so it's easy to learn how to install it when you check it later on GitHub. It has some notes for this presentation that I've written myself. But most importantly, all the things that we are interested in that we talked about are in the features folder. So here we actually also see this feature file, which is a file just containing these specifications by example. This is the actual content. This is something that Cucumber calls features. So you can write how your feature is called. This helps when reporting something about these tests that Cucumber also takes care of. And then we just write all our different test scenarios, all our different example scenarios that our product should adhere to. So a scenario for the Hello World case, a scenario in which we let it fill in a form, and a scenario where we check for accessibility. You can also dive into the code of the two more advanced scenarios, but it will take me forever to talk that completely through. So let's just dive into the Hello World code. And actually what Cucumber does when it's run as a command, it will run for a certain folder, and if not given any, it will just run in the folder where you are. And it will just scan for all the JavaScript that it would need to connect to your feature file. And that's why this steps folder has all kinds of JavaScript files. So let's look at the steps from Hello World. Even though I named it for me to easily recognize that these contain the steps for Hello World, Cucumber just looks at all of them and loads them all up and knows how to make sense of them after that. So this is how that file looks like. I need to be able to use Cucumber stuff. So that's what these statements do. They allow me to do Cucumber stuff, these before, given, when, and then. And we want to do some WebDriver stuff because we want to check websites. And then actually this is where these two are linked up. As you can see here, we say when we request the werken bij homepage. As I said, this thing is a Cucumber function. So by actually with using this bit of code, we can let Cucumber know there is a when step that for the rest is called we request by the werken bij homepage. This step exists. It's this one. And Cucumber is able to map these two together. Actually, because it just reads this file and it just looks for keywords. It knows the keyword feature, it knows the keyword scenario, when, then, and of course also given. And it knows how to respond with the rest of that. So it knows with when I need to look for a bit of JavaScript that is connected to this bit of text. So this is the bit of text that we then also declare this. So how does this actually work? We say, let's say its identifier. How can Cucumber identify this bit of code? We can pass it a few options, and sadly, I needed to give it a pretty lengthy timeout because of analytics. And then we have our function. As said before, our function needs to do something with a browser via WebDriver, which is the different application, which is therefore asynchronous. So our function is also asynchronous, which means it can await. Here we have this driver variable, which is basically our handle to the WebDriver, to the browser, and we can let it get certain pages as such, just by this statement. this will make a browser browse to that URL and retrieve the page. Maybe it's a bit of magic what this driver does. So we will look. It comes from this driver builder JavaScript file that I've written, which is just a nice wrap up of building a neatly configured driver and connector to a browser. So running through this file, we want to do WebDriver stuff. We don't want to use Chrome, so this line is not actually needed. We do want to use Firefox, so we want to load that up. And we want to actually build up a WebDriver, and you need these modules to do that. This is a bit of code I just step over. It doesn't do anything. But then here we are building this connector, this WebDriver, how Selenium WebDriver calls it, hence the name maybe. So we want a new WebDriver and we want to build it up. We want to have Firefox. Then we can pass it some settings, some configuration that it needs to start it up. And actually, as I said, we can, for each of these WebDriver steps, it tries to do that for a while until it gives up, like a user gives up after this infinite spinner. And that's this timeout that we do give along here. You can pass along many more configurations. I tried to do that here, but you can look into the documentation of WebDriver, which is really complete, to see how this goes. Of course, it's really complete because it exists for quite some years. So after we've configured our web browser, which one and according to which settings, we can just say, okay, and now start it up. And that's what that build command does. After doing that, it returns a handle to do more browser commands to it. That's why we have a browser over here. And that's why we can go to a certain page. So if we have then this when step like this, we can also take a look at this then step. We should just see something. It's a hello world example. So I thought, let's look at the H1 heading level 1, the most important content element on your page. So we retrieve it as such. We take again our driver handle, and on the page we want to find a certain element. WebDriver gives you all kinds of ways to find these elements, and you need to pass that to this function. For example, you can do that by for a certain CSS selector, but you can also do that in all kinds of other ways, such as XPath, content in that page element, in that DOM node, you name it. Remember that we're contacting WebDriver, so that's a bit of asynchronous code, and we store the result in a variable. Then we want to look at that content of that element. So we retrieve it, and that thing is a WebDriver thing, so we need to await it again. And we think that text should be inside of that element should be ontdek Capgemini. So that's how we first get a page using JavaScript. Then and then check if that page has a certain content. I see Jaap asking if I should have used const. I can easily replace this with const, but I just learned JavaScript when there was no const yet. So every single time that I declare something, I just have a subconscious tendency to use var. My current project does luckily have linters to catch all these and rewrite them to let and const, which is better. I also see Bart filling in to use let. Const would be better in this case because const is for constant, and this one does not change. You just want to read it, and you never want to reassign its value. Let is okay with that. Const does not. You typically have all kinds of situations where you want to use the one or the other, and this gives yourself an extra countermeasure to use the wrong thing. I'm actually not from 85, but from 87. But hey, That's pretty close. That's pretty close. Anyways, I'm going to a different subject. Like this, we can write some JavaScript code that can control our browser in the way that we want. And also, we can write feature files that follow along that will call the right bits of JavaScript at the right time for a test. And also realize that these text files are still readable. They can be read by the business. So that's also you get this epic handshake of business value and testability. And why I really like gherkins. Not to eat, maybe, but just in my code. So how does this actually run? Here I have a Windows command prompt. In that actual folder here, I can just check out the directory, and we still are in having a git ignore. We have our executables for a WebDriver. So this is basically that same project. This is also the project that I will show you the link in a little bit. The web version of Teams is lagging sometimes. Okay, I'll try to take it a bit slower. Sorry for these technical inconveniences. Oh, so I should talk fast, but move the screen slow. Thanks, Stefan. This is again that same project. See package log, package JSON, README with our drivers. And as I said, these drivers can be found by WebDriver. And that's because they're on the so-called path. They're just in the same folder for now. We can talk all day about how the command line works, but that's not the subject of today. But just having these executables here allows the WebDriver JS code see these executables so it can use them. You can use npm to actually call Cucumber. You can also run it separately, but I've prepped the package log, package JSON such that there is an npm run command. Actually, the most basic npm run command that also comes by default, which is npm run test. So running this command runs Cucumber, and Cucumber will just run on this folder. It will find the feature files and the JavaScript files, do the matchmaking, run the JavaScript code, after which WebDriver will trigger and build up the browser connector for us. And then Cucumber can go through its given whens and thens of those 3 test scenarios that we have. So let's see if this all works or if I'm just bullshitting all of you. The thing is that this requires some file scanning, folder scanning, and also launching a browser, which is like a gigabyte in RAM memory. So this will take a little bit of starting up, but if it's there and now you see it, then it can just run a test. Look at the top to see that there's a robot here, which means that it's controlled by WebDriver. This is the second test, filling in a form for front end. And this is the third test. And when it's all done, which I think is almost, I've written a little bit of code. You can look at it in the project. And then it works. 3 scenarios, the hello world one, the forms one, and the accessibility one, and 7 steps. And that's these 2, these 3, and these 2, which combine to 7. So that's exactly how we thought it worked. So let's do it ourselves. I see a question from Joost. I first want to direct the people towards the project to try it themselves. It's on GitHub. Ryan also just shared the link to the project in the chat. So click on the link, clone the project, get it installed, and build some tests ourselves. To be clear, we keep this open. I'm going to turn off this GIF because I do like it, but after like 10 seconds, it gets me completely distracted. Feel free to ask any problems that you run into. Or actually, I can just follow the link myself, so I can actually just, you know, like show you.
Yeah, and guys, don't hesitate to open your microphone from now on and just ask questions via the mic as well, or use the chat, whatever you prefer.
Exactly. So this is that project. And here's how you need to install it. As it said on the meetup page, you need Git, you need Node, you need Firefox. So have them installed. You need to check out this repository. I'm just so I feel like a dinosaur because this, of course, should be clone. But anyways, clone the repository, run npm install. So we get them all there. And then install the WebDriver executable, that connector that I talked about. Place it next to the package.json, which is the root folder of this project. Yeah, read the description. But if you do run into issues, do let me know. Here it also has a short description on how you can run Cucumber. But as I showed you, you can just use npm run test to get it going. I saw Joost Arends ask a question.
Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. So currently, you have used a browser which is getting invoked by Cucumber. So can we have any headless browser execution? Say like using a Puppeteer or
yes,
somewhat like that.
Yeah.
Can we incorporate that?
You're talking about, for example, Chrome headless, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well, you can start Chrome in a headless mode by giving it startup parameters. And actually, if you look at this driver builder that I've built here, in this bit of code, you can construct it in such a way that you can also pass along command line parameters to it. So you can give it also this -- headless. I don't know the code out of my head. I would need to refactor it a little bit to run on Chrome. I do like live coding, but to be fair, this is the first time that I've worked with WebDriver.js and Cucumber.js, so I don't feel that comfortable yet to completely transform it into that. But that's how you would do that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, does the browser close down automatically after the each test? No, it doesn't. As I said, I've written a little bit of code for that. And that's indeed, as Bart said, the after all function. That's something, again, you need to do via WebDriver. So you need to just close it. It has an after all. Cucumber knows about this. And from that, it just knows that when I'm done running all the scenarios that I know of, from all the feature files that I found, after I'm done with that, I'm just going to run the after all code. And I'm telling WebDriver to then close the browser. Otherwise, it does not, and I get a big collection of Firefoxes.
And you're using the after row now to close the browser after all the tests have been performed. But does Cucumber, can it also supply you with an after function?
It also has an after function, yes, but I don't want to close down the browser after every scenario, because that just takes more time.
Yeah, I understand for demo purposes.
Yeah, I do understand if you want to isolate your tests more properly, you can change this after all to after, and then of course you wouldn't be passing along session stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have a question. Is there any report generated for the test?
Well, there is the log that you have here. And I did not dive into it more deeply than that. For this JS setup, I do know that in the Java setup that we have at my current client, that there's like ample opportunities to get Cucumber to report, but they work in in a Maven settings kind of way with all kinds of Maven plugins that you can plug together with your Cucumber. But I do think that there's a way to do that, but I would need to look it up, to be frank.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
So reporting is a nice second session for this.
Also, but talking about reporting, the X plugin that I've built in does do reporting. So if people are interested in that, I'll just take that bit of code. So there's a module for that, because what you actually need to do is like you would get a page like you do normally, and then you would need to investigate that page, whether it has some accessibility issues on it. And that actually means that there are some HTML that has the wrong structure, let's say. So you need to have something in the browser that investigates the HTML or interacts with the HTML. Sounds like JavaScript, right? So we actually use our WebDriver to load in into our test a bit of JavaScript that actually would analyze this and report back using our WebDriver as a, let's say, tunnel. So we that's actually how this works. I chopped this this code snippet a bit together a bit more easily, so I didn't completely abstract away this this promise. But here we can await it, so that because of this await, this whole function is not passing on. What we will do is onto the WebDriver, we hook up our module that will load in this JavaScript and give some report out, which is just what this, we connect that to to our browser via WebDriver, and then we just run it, let it analyze. And out of that analysis, it could error or there come some test results. So that's what this does. And there's actually a different module that does actually, for this very specific case, give some nice reporting. It can print it to a comma-separated value file called test results. And that's also why I skipped over it, but this file exists also here, as you can see here. And as this is like for WebDriver for this X reporting, I do think that for a Cucumber, which is a more generic case, there's ample reporting support. I see someone also mentioning Cypress for end-to-end testing. I've also seen Stefan like jumping in and out of this this Teams call. If I'm not mistaken, at Stefan's and maybe Bart, if he's also there, Bart Kooijman, they do have some experience in using Cypress at their client.
Yeah, we have some experience with Cypress as well. I can tell you from my experience, Cypress is a pretty awesome tool to work with. But be very, very aware when you try it. If you want to start doing parallel testing with Cypress, you have to start paying for it, which we don't like.
Yeah, that results in discussions and takes time.
Indeed, indeed.
And on top of that, you could not open another new tab while executing in Cypress.
Yeah, there are some shortcomings from Cypress, but it does have a really cool walkthrough afterwards, where you can get a visual step-by-step of what happened during the test.
Yeah.
Already see Sven shouting out Test Cafe.
I also see Fred asking about PDF report. Yes, that is possible. If you hook up enough code to it, then for sure it's possible. Because in the end, of course, this is all reporting resulting from code. and we can use some code to also generate that into a PDF. But that's I'm not sure, and I'm not expecting actually there to be a module for this, because these PDF reports do work well if you have a big amount of testing that you would need to do. But yeah, this whole behavior-driven development style of making your tests comes from the agile software development angle, which just really tries to do it really frequently in small increments, which means that you also probably have a software development workflow that is more using CI/CD and tooling looking into this. So you'll have tools more looking at your test results, maybe more than users, which means that you'll have this as a build step in, for example, your Jenkins or GitLab pipeline. And those pipelines would fail, which would prevent that version of your code to go to production. And it all does that automatically.
I have done Cucumber with PDF generation, and for a complete application to generate a regression testing, and the customer just expected when I get a lot of pages all green, it's okay. Then the new thing hadn't broke anything, including pictures from every test succeeded. You had to get a screenshot from the end field. It was a Cucumber test scenario running for 1.5 hours or so.
Yeah, you could also write your pipeline as such that it like emails that. If you can, I saw someone mentioning curl scripting. Well, you can put that something like that into it, or script it as such to send an email. I know that Jenkins has a plugin for that. Yeah. Whether the test failed or not, you can just get the test results as an email to any recipient.
But it is for reporting. It was a possibility to generate screenshots from your steps from your test.
Oh, screenshots.
Yeah.
That is also possible.
Yeah, you can generate a report of your tests the way it had run. So,
yeah, you can do both, like the statistics, the test results, but also you can make screenshots, and you could even, if you would script enough around it, of course, write it in such a way that it would do some visual regression testing. Then again, is visual regression testing really helping you out there? Is another question. I do see that people that are coming from that train of thought and moving more towards using pattern libraries and not pixel perfect design delivery. If a component changed but it still looks good, yeah, it did change, but it looks good, so it's good, and that's why it's and that's like a human assessment. That's an approach that we started to use at my clients, and to be frank, as a front-end developer, I much more appreciate that kind of cooperation with each other. I saw some microphone. If someone wants to say something, do.
Yeah, that was me. I was wondering if there's anybody making any cool tests already that they want to share.
Yeah, I have a question, Florian, by the way.
Sure.
In this case, how many would you consider testing, like all the features or just most important features?
What do you mean with most important?
Yeah, well, I mean the most valuable features for users.
That's the word, exactly.
Yeah. So, because I remember, yeah.
Yeah, I need to be careful here because Joost Arends, who already showed up in the chat, is on the same project as I am. But you
listening very closely now.
Yeah, making notes here. You want to test for the things that are valuable. You can and yeah, Sven is already mentioning the test pyramid. Indeed, you do not want to test every single thing in this kind of way, as you've already seen in the demo. This is not always very fast, and that's also why performance for a WebDriver, it's something you need to keep in check. So definitely keeping in check means not putting all the test scenarios that anybody ever found important into feature files, just until infinity. Do the things that you find important. Make sure that you cover all the valuable workflows. So yeah, whether you successfully log in, yeah, you still want to make sure that you can do that every single time. Maybe also if there are some certain ways that we want people to not be able to log in, check for that as well. But you don't want to check your login prompt for any kind of special character using these tests. That's where unit tests actually, that's something that unit tests should cover, which is in a lower tier in your test pyramid. These tests, the end user tests, are like the top of your test pyramid because they're highly valuable, but not really performant. Where unit tests, they're not really connected to business value, but they're very performant. So if you can cover your small units really well with your units, and then from that point on build more up and up and up to make sure that well, if this bit of code works, then with these unit tests, I know that it also works in this kind of way. And that's how you try to cover that up. But yeah, also as Joost very rightly said, it's not an exact science, you know. So it depends is also something that sadly pops up here as well. Yeah, so we can keep on talking about it, but that's why I stop here. So does this kind of answer your question?
Yeah. So main problem that I had in the past is that sometimes these kind of tests, even if you're testing your most important features, is that sometimes they're also data dependent. And since it's very important that we are actually testing on the production website, since we're trying to actually do what our user will be doing, of course, this also means that you're actually handling real data instead of test data, which also means that the data can differ or can change. And if you're expecting something but it's gone because the data has changed, that's a problem, right? So how do you handle or prevent this? Because if tests start failing, not because the functionality is not working, but because data has changed and tests become unreliable to us, and then we don't trust them anymore because we know it's working fine. I mean, this is what we've experienced in the test, and then suddenly you get a non-functioning test, but nobody cares because we all know it should be working just fine. It's just data.
Yeah, this is actually not purely a end user test problem. It's a test problem for any kind of test. That you don't want it to be influenced by any other data. When I talked about unit tests, that's what I meant with isolated test. And then at our current client, which where we're building a website mainly for information purposes at the Dutch police, content is a tricky thing. Also for that, so we don't want content of one test to influence a different test. So that's why we built some way to put some content into the CMS in a most isolated kind of way possible, such that it won't influence other tests or breaks the website or what have you, such that it can just put the content there, run the test, and after the test is done, some cleanup to remove that bit of content again. And as such, you don't run that much into that problem. If you're running on production, yeah, I would be really careful with running tests on production in that sense. It depends on how you would mitigate that, but most typically I would recommend an acceptance environment, which has a copy of production data, but is not connected to production and will influence itself the data on production. So you could just, in your production rollout, you first set up your acceptance environment by copying the data of production to acceptance, by deploying the new version of your applications also on acceptance, and using that to run your tests. That kind of way.
There's also an alternative to handle content that is only checking if there's content and not which content. That way the content can change, and if it's missing, the test fails because content is missing. But if the content has changed but is still there, the test succeeds.
Yeah.
That's also a possibility to do production testing.
To give kind of a more clear example, what my test did, and I'm just going to pick a browser, is going to werken bij Capgemini. Here, no, I'm just gonna search for stuff, which is here. So I type in something, and then I need to make my test, hit enter. And you see this bit of content here. And before my test was failing because if you just type in something and you don't hit enter, it just remembers in the URL, which is, oh, this is bad. Pompidom. Smooth.
Maybe that's the DDoS Sven was talking about. Everybody testing against his website.
Which could be possible. I don't. That's okay. But you can just check for certain elements. So maybe on this anti-DDoS page, you just want to make sure that there's a URL that allows you to easily go back to where you came from. Because it's stated as such to not be that clear that it's because of a DDoS. So there's that. Any other questions? I think I saw Sven also asking something. How about test data and Cucumber? Yeah, we talked about it already a little bit. But if you have further questions, Sven, do let me know. Let us know for the discussion of the group. Like the array thingy. I'm not really sure what you mean with the array thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to move from a room where else it was quite noisy. I meant I knew there was a kind of a feature in Cucumber that you could make like a list of test data you want to test your test to.
Yeah, sadly he could not be there, but a colleague from the police, Mazin, actually wrote a blog post on that. And to get everybody on board, what you mean is that you have in your feature file, you can annotate stuff. I don't know the exact stuff, but if you would do it like as such, you can take this along. It's via pipes. Thanks, Maarten. That's text you can actually use in your JavaScript code. That also works in Cucumber JS, if that's your question. And it's actually then will be parameters of your step definition functions.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a nice strong feature. I thought it should be mentioned.
Yeah, there are all these kinds of nice features that are that I could dive into, but it's I skipped over them for now because they could detract and confuse people. But indeed, Cucumber is really a nice feature-complete library to set these tests up while keeping your feature file readable, as well as really hooking into code well.
Yeah, especially that part. It's a cool feature, but it's also a very dangerous and overused feature, where you see that your test code starts looking more like your actual code, which you should actually start writing tests for, right?
Is this a way to find that thing? No. Nope.
Probably on LinkedIn, the second link.
Yeah, I know that is Mazin, but I do know that he wrote a blog on this. This is the one, I think. Test consultant, social media shares, write to me. Maybe they depublished it?
No,
I can look for it. He recently sent it to me, so.
I added it in the comments just now.
Didn't I
nice,
see him
thanks.
on stage somewhere last year?
Yeah, he's this the singer of the summer party. But he's also a tester. Or test automator, test automation expert, I think he uses. He's a good guy. I did see that Gabriel was building an actual test. Do you already have something to demo?
Yeah, but it's going so fast, it's not really as cool as I thought. Give me a few seconds, maybe I can make it a bit cooler.
Sure, sure.
But it's basically just reusing your form only to prove that I'm a living human being. Weird, yeah, I'll get to it.
We're using test automation to fill in CAPTCHAs. This is yeah, kind of cyberpunky, right?
You know that one video of the mini robot proving he's not a robot?
I forgot about it, sorry.
Let me check.
People are clearly looking for a challenge.
Definitely. Are there actually any other people trying to get the project to work, maybe running into some problems that we need to help out with, that they're interested in? Of course, you can, I'm not going to delete the test project on GitHub, so you can look at it later. That's also just fine. Use it for inspiration. How to do this, how not to do this. I don't know. But as we are running out of questions in that sense, I don't know if anybody wants to demo their code that they've built. To be honest, I'm pretty interested if I could explain it that well, that actually worked out. No pressure.
You should really watch the video that Gabriel just mentioned. It's awesome.
Oh yeah, I think I've seen this, but it's great.
Pretty sure that's not a robot.
Hey. Nice.
Is this going to be the next test automation lesson on how we're going to do this?
With robotics or something. That's how you could do mobile testing, I guess. Maybe hook up a camera towards, like image recognition to see what's on your mobile device. I'm not sure if it's the fastest test setup ever, but it's, mimicking a user, doing its thing. Gabriel, are you interested in showing your test or?
Yeah, I'll just share a screenshot, I guess, because it's run so quick that there's actually nothing to see.
You can add some weights, can't you?
Sorry?
You can add weight in between, so it takes longer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you set
do that.
timeout and all kinds of garbage.
Yeah, slow down your test. That's what testers like, right?
Yeah, I want to see the automated test. Yes. Okay, let me do that real quick.
Show us the goodness. Well, taking the screenshot is slowing down a bit. I do hear some noise, so I'm just going to hit mute all because I don't know who it is. But feel free to unmute yourself if it's not you that I should be muting.
So I just started to thunder and storm in my place, and the first thing my dog does is run outside. Stupid dog.
Maybe you need to test your dog.
Yeah, I need one of those robots with the sunglasses to keep him inside. That'd be cool.
The set timeouts realize that they don't return a promise themselves. So you would need to wrap in that function. You would need to resolve your promise only then, and then await that promise that comes out of that. So that's not the prettiest code. But I do think that the MDN page on async await might actually just have a direct example on specifically that. Yeah.
Wait 5 seconds.
So yeah.
Yeah. So I'm writing even
It's
stupider code just to demo it.
Best code ever.
Okay, let's see.
And I have a question. Can you run multiple files at the same time, multiple tests?
You want to run tests in parallel?
Yeah, in parallel.
There are ways to do that, but it's tricky. And that's also because of the thing that Stefan mentioned earlier with test data. Tests need to typically run isolated for them to be predictable. What you don't want is a test to say that it failed, even though that actually the code works well. And that actually gets tricky if you run 2 tests at the same time. An example, for example, is if you would have a test setup where you want to run the same test scenario twice, once, I don't know, with a desktop browser, and the second time maybe for a mobile browser. But they work on the same thing. Maybe it's your purchasing process if you're building an e-commerce website. So your desktop test is setting this up and trying to then make the purchase, but your mobile test was in there just a bit faster and did the purchase it did it on the same user. So the desktop test actually could not make the purchase because the shopping basket got empty because of the mobile test. So that's really annoying problems that you need to think about. A way to solve it is to launch your application indeed inside of 2 environments, for example, virtual environments such as Docker containers. but typically, as these tests are run into a more production-like environment, it's really tricky to launch complete production-like environments in parallel.
What I
So then you
would
need to make other clever ways to do that, such as making different test sets that do not overlap in content.
Yeah, what you could do is run only retrieval tests in parallel. So they're checking if certain content is there, those kinds of things. And if you're changing data, those need to be run in sequence. So in that case, you should split up your tests in one group which only retrieves data and one group which performs mutations. And then you can run the retrieval tests in parallel.
Okay, thank you.
See a screenshot.
Yeah, those timeouts are bugging me, so I'll just do it like this. But it works! Yay!
Awesome.
But
Well, I
it's
think that's
basically a bit of your form hello world thing, only in a different setting. So it's not that special just yet.
it's your first test. I think it's you've never built a more awesome test than this.
Exactly.
Particularly like the extensive documentation, Gabriel.
Of course.
The question was it successful? Did you exist?
Yeah, I do. I actually do.
Man.
If I would commit this and Mazen would see it, I would have a Mattermost message already now.
Yeah.
I think he wouldn't survive, obviously.
Well, I'm happy that someone got something working, so that means something got across. But I don't know if anybody still has some questions, but otherwise I think it's time to wrap up. Speak now or be silent forevermore. Cool. So,
Or at
in
least
general,
for the next session.
These SBEs, these gherkins, these given when then statements, they're very useful to construct your user stories, but also your tests. They're really, I cannot understate this enough, how well they connect your business value and your tests. And if you do that, then you can automate your tests against that using Cucumber for tests that are actually proving value. And specifically, if you're building websites, I recommend Selenium WebDriver to do that. There are also tools that abstract over this, such as WebDriver.io, which I saw Maarten also mention, which make it maybe a bit better developer experience. But that as a basis is quite nice. And also something that I didn't mention yet this evening, but still wanted to mention nonetheless, keep your tests and your test code therefore simple. I see it happen in unit tests. It can also happen in these kinds of tests. If your test code is more complex than your application code, what are you testing? Right? The test code should be so simple that it obviously does what you expect it does, because otherwise, who is checking your expectations? I do know mutation tests, which is a completely different subject to solve this. But that's something that only gets you off of the wrong path, and stay away from it in the first place by keeping your test code simple.
Well, mutation tests test your tests.
Yes.
If you have done
so if your
correct...
tests are no longer following your expectations, then that can be something to fix that. But in the first place, keep your test code simple.
No, mutation tests check whether your tests are really tests and not just code runners. Also. They don't change, they don't do anything with the expectations.
Yes.
Cool.
Thanks at least for dropping by. having this interesting evening together with me. Yeah, the next event is in September, as Ryan already said before. Pattern libraries with Storybook, something very different. For the external people, keep checking the meetup where we will post it as well. And for this evening, I'd also appreciate some feedback. I see already a lot of positive feedback. Thanks for that. We've also prepared a survey. Ryan shared the link in the chat, and if you fill it in, that helps us to improve even further. So thank you all for being there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Florian, also for doing this session. Don't forget, like you said already, in September we have the next one, and hopefully that's going to be interesting as well. And we will be trying to do this every 2 months. Thank you, Florian, very much, and I will see you and everybody else hopefully next time.